Good morning, everyone. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that could happen. There's already 11 people in this space. It's like a miracle. Amazing. Oh, I lost one. Person's like, oh, this is not where I want to be. Okay, so it's occurring to me while we get people in this space that, you know how they all come up the ramp to my trailer and we interact in some way? I can see your body language and your expression, and I get a little sense of how you're doing. And that can kind of shape how class is managed. So could y'all just give me like an emoji or a word that would suffice for that kind of visual assessment of how you're doing? Okay, sometimes I can tell by like what you're wearing or what your hair looks like, or your expression and how you're carrying your shoulders. So if y'all would be so kind. Oh, a bow. Yes, I do like the bow. Formal. It's very formal to bow. I'll tell you how I'm doing today. Oh, yes, we're going to have some guests. And actually, we could, we're not going to be able to do guest speaker day the way we normally do it, I don't think. So we might be, oh no, Matthew's just being careful. I hope you're not sick, Matthew. Kate, are you sick? Oh man, I hadn't prepared myself for the fact that y'all might be sick and be, because when you're really sick, you don't come to school, so I don't see you coming up the ramp and know you're sick. A little sleepy. Anyway, that's my track of thought because I get so excited about who's coming and how you're doing. We might be having some guest speakers come with us, come appear here to be with us, who are helping make decisions for our county and state. Hi, Georgia. Hi, Kate. Hi, Taylor. Hi, Mackenzie. Hi, Kate. Hi, Matthew. I said hello to Mitzi already. Shelby, hello. Carson, hello. Joel, hello. Joel, I'm kind of curious to know what happened with the old folks home. I'm a little worried about your straight face. So, something to follow up on maybe. Okay, so I don't want to waste your time. We're already a couple minutes into this, but I'm glad to see a lot of you seem to be fine. Hi, Sophia. And Kareem and Lyric. Okay, so I got to focus. I want to say hello to you each individually, but I'm going to move on so that we don't waste our time. So what are we doing here today? Well, remember the general background I gave you yesterday. What this is not. This is not a lecture for class. This is not an assignment. This will not be graded. This is not official WCPSS news or policy. This is not a vanity project. I don't really care how many people see it, as long as the people who see it find it helpful. It's not particularly high production or well prepared. What it is from the heart and me trying to help you see how the disciplines we study in social studies can help you navigate this moment. And also how you can be about 3 days ahead of everyone else in terms of what is going on. Okay, so those are my goals with being here. And remember, these are disciplines that are going to inform our study: psychology, sociology, history, economics, geography, and government and civics. Okay, I'm going to be getting into government and civics a little bit more later in the week as our institutions are slower in those institutions to adapt to our new realities. But this first couple sessions, I'm talking more about psychology and sociology because the family that's going to, the institution that's going to be most adaptive to this moment is actually the family. And so these first couple days, I want to talk about what those adaptations can look like and what kind of practical problems can be solved, focusing on that institution and its adaptations. Okay, so in sociology, you have what we call social interaction theory, okay? And it is the means by which we interact in different ways. And I'm going to focus on just 5 of them. And I'm being really general and simplistic here, okay? You could take a whole graduate level course on this that's on this page, okay? There's a lot of nuance and complexity to it, but I'm probably a generalist. I like big ideas and about 30,000 feet big ideas. And then I kind of trust my students and people to figure out how to drill that down to their specific context in life. Okay, so that's the level at which I'm functioning. And this is the stuff I just hold in my head that I have found really useful to me in my life. Okay, so social interaction theory says that we interact with other people on one of these 5 ways. Okay, there's coercion. Coercion is when, in order to get someone to do what you want them to do, you use social pressure or physical force. So this could include like holding a gun to someone's head and making them do something, or it could also be creating social forces that encourage them to do something. Okay, other people work for a common goal that they both hold valuable. Okay, then there is conflict and competition. Some people split these out. Conflict can be like where you're competing for a limited resource, and you're seeking the submission of someone. And then there's competition, which is a little different, but it's as you're working for the same goal, but there's going to be someone who wins in that effort and someone who loses. And then there's social exchange. Social exchange is when, like, I scratch your back and you scratch mine. We have different goals, but it can look like cooperation. Okay. And then there is conformity. Conformity is when you just conform to what everyone else is doing without pressure, or it's voluntary conformity, okay, where you just decide to start doing what everyone else is doing so that you can fit in and be accepted. Okay, so why is Ms. Gilly teaching us about this today? Well, we are going to have to figure out how to do school, or not even do school. It's not about school, it's about education. We're going to have to figure out how to make a case for why we should continue educating ourselves without coercion. Okay. In the past, we have created these institutions called schools where we bring our young people and we create social forces to force them to conform and do what we want them to do in terms of educating themselves and achieving certain educational outcomes. Now, it feels like coercion at that level, but why do we do this? Okay, so we need to look at sociology, larger framework. Why is education one of the 5 key institutions in society? Why is education so important and therefore worthy of our attention, even when we aren't being coerced in schools to do it? We're not being manipulated like puppets to worry about our grades and our matriculation and all that stuff. Okay, so the reason why education is so important is twofold. One is that we've got to get into the younger generation the knowledge and abilities and skills to carry on the society when the old people are dead. Okay, so that's pretty simple to understand, right? If we have MRI machines and all the people who built the MRI machines and know how to maintain the MRI machines die, and none of the younger people are learning about how to maintain those machines or how they work or what the scientific principles are behind them, and then when the older generation dies, we will have a dysfunctional society that starts breaking down and devolving instead of evolving. Okay, so that's just a big picture why we need education in general. A second reason why we really need education is that we are a republic and we have to elect people who will make decisions and policy that will affect all of us. And we need to be very informed citizens capable of critical thinking and that can make good decisions within that context and make sure that we are a sustainable nation in terms of how we're governed. So even during this period of time when you don't have to go to school or your siblings don't have to go to school, I'm going to try and seek your cooperation, okay? Instead of coercing you into being educated, I'm going to seek your cooperation to a common goal, which is that in a time of crisis in our nation, we really more than ever need to attend to education because it's a time when we need to make really good decisions about who's leading us and what we need to know and how we need to know it and who we can rely on for good information. Okay, so the question becomes that I've been facing for the last 2 days of my own children is, well, what is education going to look like over the next few weeks if we don't have the traditional structures to guide what we're learning and how we're learning it? Okay, So one thing I want to introduce to you today is just the idea of multiple intelligences theory. This is from psychology and sociology, and it's about cognition and learning, which is a really big focus of those two disciplines. And you can just Google Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences theory, okay? And you'll see really pretty graphics and all kinds of cool representations of what it is I'm speaking about today. And I don't want to go, too long about this because I want us to have some time for questions and those things. But these are the ways you can be intelligent, okay? Whenever someone says like, oh, he's so smart or she's so smart, I always say, well, in what way? Okay, because we are all smart and intelligent. We're just intelligent in different ways. And so I think it's important to name what Gardner has identified as those types of intelligence, okay? The first one is interpersonal intelligence, probably the most important kind of intelligence that will serve you over your lifetime. It's about communicating with other people and interacting with other people. And it's about interaction, okay? And we're gonna really struggle to achieve this kind of intelligence during this time period because we're limited in how much we can physically interact with each other. But as we see with this video I'm making here, we can innovate and continue learning. And so this thing we're doing today is an important part of us continuing our interpersonal intelligence and developing it and maintaining it and figuring out how to evolve it, okay? Then you have this another type of intelligence that's super important but very undervalued. It's called intrapersonal intelligence. Intrapersonal intelligence is about you inside yourself thinking about what you know, what you want to know, how you can learn it, taking temperature of your own like attitudes and psychological states. And so these are people who are really good at teaching themselves things, understanding what they need to access to do that, and following through on it. So kind of executive function, self-regulation that we talked about yesterday, okay? Then you have verbal linguistic. I don't know why I put that little space there. That should be one whole word, linguistic. This is people who are really good at words, writing, reading, speaking, speech, okay? And logical mathematical are people who are good with math, logic, puzzles, those types of things. So these are probably the two that are most valued in formal education, probably why the SAT has a verbal and mathematical section. You see what I'm saying? Some other types of intelligence like these are often underemphasized or not formalized, but are probably the most important actually to your development as a successful human being in the world. Then we have musical intelligence. That's obviously about understanding rhythm and creating and appreciating music. Kinesthetic is the ability to control your body or understand how your body moves through time and space. People who are really good at sports, hand-eye coordination, those kinds of things are kinesthetically intelligent. Then you have visual spatial. These are people who are really good at seeing how things are laid out in space. They're good at watching images, photography, videos, graphic design. They inherently understand balance and composition and those kinds of things. And then you have naturalistic intelligence. These are people who are very comfortable in natural environments and understand the processes and cycles that are at work there and how they function, okay? So what I'm saying here is that in order for us to be healthy, happy people who are maximizing our potential and staying healthy, okay? So remember what the goal is we're cooperating towards here, okay? I'm asking you to cooperate. What's the goal of our cooperation? The goal of our cooperation is to have a society that's as happy and healthy mentally and physically and as a culture as possible. And so instead of all of us staying in our rooms and watching YouTube videos or TikTok for 8 hours, as my middle schoolers seem prone to do, we've got to make sure that we attend to the development of ourselves fully as humans so that we can meet this moment. And so what I'm asking you to do is, in whatever ways you can moving forward over the next few days, I want you to think about how you can attend to these types of intelligence in your own life and how you can help the other people in your family also make sure that they are attending to those types of intelligence, okay? So what we've been doing in my family the last couple of days is we've been having a morning meeting. We're negotiating what time that meeting is to, meet the needs of people. We have an unusual opportunity here to like sleep later than usual, and getting adequate sleep and nutrition during this time period is first and foremost. If you remember in my classroom the day before we left, we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, so your physical needs of sleep and food, those things come first. Okay, at the point that your family is able to meet those needs, then we can start moving up the hierarchy towards these other kinds of issues. So what we're doing every morning is we're assessing, how, so you can do this in any way you want to in your family. The process is not as important as just the end goal, that you cooperate as a family unit to attend to everyone's needs. So we just ask everyone, how are you doing? How are you feeling physically? How are you feeling mentally? How are you doing emotionally? And then let's talk about the day, and let's talk about what kinds of learning we're going to engage in today to maximize our development and potential, keep our spirits up, keep us feeling like we are moving towards goals together that help us feel like our existence here is meaningful and that we are collectively working towards the greater good. Okay. And then some of you are having experiential education. You don't need to plan your day, because your day is planning itself, because you are going out and figuring out new ways to work in the world, or your work situation is changing and you are preparing for that. And that's great. Okay. If you are having new experiences that are drawing upon your skills and abilities, then that's all we could ask for, right? Because you are having to rise to the moment and attend to those responsibilities. But some of you might be looking at a day in front of you with hours and hours that you're not quite sure how to package with you and your siblings and maybe your parents. Okay. So what we're doing is we're looking every day at how we're developing some of these things. Now, the intrapersonal part is just the discussion of this and making a schedule for myself for the day. Okay. That's interpersonal right there, checked off. If you're doing this process and you're engaging in this kind of schedule thinking, then you're good. If you're online, or you're attending to this seminar, this vlog, or you're interacting with your friends online, then this is good to go. Okay. This might involve you looking on Amazon and reading reviews to decide what book you want to read. Okay. This might be doing the same for your siblings. It might be looking at what books you have in the house. I'm not sure that I would continue learning the books and ideas that you were doing in school, because it very well might be when you come back to school, you're going to pick those up where you left off. No matter what your teachers communicated with you about that, we've been told not to have kids move forward in new learning during this time period, because we can't figure out how to do it equitably. So today my kids are reading books, and we're doing some online, we're doing some note taking as we read the books, and then we're going to be discussing the books and checking to make sure we understand comprehension and what ideas we can share about that. Okay. Then you need to look at logical mathematical ways of staying sharp, which could involve doing some practice drills, or Dreambox seems to be something my children are doing a lot of. So you want to think about, there's some access and a lot of resources for this in the world, because these are a huge focus of formal education. Okay. You want to appreciate some music every day. Create music if you can. Think about how you can be attuned to different rhythmic realities, and that is usually pretty much baked into adolescent culture as well. So I'm not so worried about that. You need to be getting out, or in, or exercising, or moving part of your body physically every day. It's a great way to lessen anxiety, get your heart rate up, maintain high, relieve stress. Okay. And so if you aren't doing this, then this is a great time to start. You can also walk outside. You can maintain some distance between people, but still get some sunshine. And so you need to think about how you're doing that every day. Okay. And I feel like a lot of us get enough visual spatial through the internet as well, in terms of watching videos or those kinds of things. So I'm less worried about that kind of education or intelligence. And then this, of course, is really important. We find that interacting with nature, just being outside, feeling the breeze on your face, seeing the sun, it's spring, and that can be pretty simple, but also reassuring and also really inspiring. Okay, so the multiple intelligences theory, I think, could help during this time period. Now, The other thing is I've seen a lot of parents out online making these very specific schedules for what's going to happen every 30 minutes in their household. And while I appreciate their psychological need for control and to feel like they have a plan and it's going to be so great, and I'm afraid some of them are setting themselves up for failure because those kind of efforts need to be attuned to developmental psychology, okay? You've got to match the process with the developmental level of the person, okay? So little children, smaller kids really like a routine, and they really don't need to participate in the development of those routines because they just are cooperative by nature, okay? So you make the routine, you tell them you're excited about it, they will pretty much do it without a whole lot of resistance or questions. And they like routine, and they like moving quickly from activity to activity. As your young people move up in developmental age, they want to take more autonomy and ownership of their learning. And so I don't create a schedule for my middle schoolers, and I would never create a schedule for my high schoolers, because if you want there to be cooperation going on and not coercion, they need to buy into it. They need to build it with you. They need to be involved in the process and create the schedule for the day so that they have ownership of it and they feel like it's valid and valuable. And if you don't build that schedule with cooperation, then you are doing it through coercion, and you have to micromanage it and micro supervise it. And there's a lot of yelling and screaming, and and that can create conflict within your household. So I've made a case for why you need to continue learning, even in this time of no school. And I've made a case for how you could frame that, thinking about multiple intelligences and how that might lead to greater harmony within your family and within your household, and lead to greater mental, spiritual, and physical health in a challenging time. Okay? And that you need to make sure that the processes you come up with are attuned to the developmental realities of the members of your household and how old they are, and do whatever you need to do to make sure you have maximum cooperation, not conflict, not coercion, not even necessarily social exchange, which is, I'll do this for you if you'll do that for me. The goal should be cooperation, okay? As much as possible in your households right now is explain the why to everyone in the household and try and get buy-in about the why, what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we're all cooperating to that shared goal. Okay? All right, so that's all I prepared for today, and how psychology and sociology might lead your families to be more adaptive. So now I'm ready for questions. I want to talk about whatever you want to talk about, and how things are going today, and what's on your heart and what's in your mind. So, other people have joined us. Smith, yay! And Caitlin, hello, hello, hello. If you're still there, I understand people are coming and going. So what's weighing on your minds? If nothing, then we can end for today. But if something, I want to address it. I also want to hear your assessment of how you're doing or how you think you're doing. And that's how we started today. Do we think it'll be a difficult adjustment when we eventually go back to school? Well, I think it kind of depends on what your experience has been at home. I think if some families learn how to navigate this really well, then it might be hard to go back to school because you've kind of built a system that's probably going to be a little more responsive to your physical needs. And it might be hard getting up early again and, or doing the thing. But I think a lot of adolescents inherently like to be together. And so there might be a lot of relief in the opportunity to do that. So I think it would be mixed. Some people also could have very dysfunctional families or a lack of resources in their household. And so coming back to school could be a huge relief for them. So I think that going back to school could just be very variable. What are my thoughts on today's primaries proceeding as normal? Boy, that was tough, wasn't it? I just think it's a hard call, and I really feel a lot of empathy for the officials who had to decide whether we're going to value free and fair elections or we're going to value health and safety. I mean, those are two competing principles and ideas that nobody wants to pick between, right? Because we really value our democracy, and we at the same time have to protect health and safety. So what I'm really, really grateful about is I think the political parties are private organizations, and they don't have to have primaries. They don't have to do any of this. They could innovate and they probably have in their rule books some worst case scenario for how they can arrive at a nominee in preparation for the November elections that's legal, at least according to their rules. So I'm just really grateful that we're not a month ago when there was no seeming clarity on who could be the acceptable nominee for the Democratic Party. I think at this point, the Democrats could nominate Joe Biden, and the majority of Democrats would think that that was an acceptable solution to the nomination problem. So the degree to which our country can be, I mean, I know that the supporters of Bernie Sanders won't necessarily agree with me about that. And that's a very controversial statement I just said, but I'm a generalist. And at some point, I feel like you've got to just look at the big picture. And that is that we need as little conflict and controversy moving forward as possible in this particular election this year. So I don't think they should have proceeded with the primaries. I think that they could have pushed them back. The convention Thursday. Yeah. Oh my God. I totally forgot. Okay. She called me out. I'm glad you can't pinch me through the screen. But hi, Elena. I haven't seen your name earlier. So, all right. Okay. So Mackenzie's asking if we think states are going to close down all restaurants and basically everything. Yeah, I mean, I think that could happen. I'm looking ahead at the other countries that are ahead of us, Italy and Spain especially, and they have pretty much declared very stringent policies about movement outside of your homes. And I think that could happen moving forward, especially if we start seeing our numbers of cases peak and we start seeing people not complying with even the most basic protocols related to social distancing. So I'm waiting for my husband to come home and say that they are in training in any way for creating that kind of process of policing. It might also be carried out through the National Guard, the state military force. So I think it's possible. Kate says, my aunt said she heard from her colleagues that have connections to the Pentagon that major restrictions are coming today. I don't know what those restrictions will be. I would be kind of surprised if those kind of restrictions started at the federal level, to be honest, because the federal government does not have a presence. You see that with our immigration policy, for example, right? So it's up to the feds to enforce immigration policy, and they try to get the state and local forces to do it, and that's how we got sanctuary cities, because they push back on that. So I would be surprised in America, thanks to our federal system, if we impose those kinds of restrictions from the federal level down, because you need buy-in from the local and state authorities. Remember, I think we have something like 7,800 separate law enforcement agencies throughout the country with their own leadership and their own protocols and their own training. So the federal government just doesn't have a presence in local communities to make that out. So I think if whatever those restrictions are going to be, if they're coming, then they would have to be carried out by local and state forces. And if immigration enforcement is any example of that, then they better make sure they have a lot of buy-in from local and state authorities. So, I mean, I'm not saying that your aunt is wrong. I'm just saying there's some historical precedent there that makes me have questions about that. All right. So Eric is saying she was supposed to take the SAT this past Saturday, but it was rescheduled and since canceled. All right. My first communication I heard from, I teach an AP course from the College Board, was that they would continue offering the regular exam day in May. And in a sense, that does make sense, right? Because I taught AP government in the fall, and my students could theoretically be readier than ever on, I think, May the 5th is their test date, because they're going to have all this time to prepare. And I've already taught them the whole curriculum, and I have all my review materials on my YouTube channel. And so, you know, if they can hold a physical test in May, my students could show up and do well, I think. Now, if you're taking that course in the spring, that creates a whole lot more problems. So I have heard now that the AP College Board and educational testing are going to have to rethink those. They said originally they would have a makeup test date that's like 3 weeks later than the regular test date, and they thought that would be sufficient. And they're providing a lot of support and materials on the AP College Board websites so that hopefully students can continue learning no matter what their schools are doing in a self-guided way. I think they're starting to question the reason to see. I even saw this morning, and I didn't read this because I'm not going to put a lot of time into it until I think it's more likely to happen, but that they were even exploring home testing, the ability for students to take those tests at home. But how you would maintain test security under those situations, I just can't tell you, especially with the time change between the East Coast and the West Coast. So stay tuned. Not a lot of clarity on that right now. All right, are there any other? These were all really good questions. Are there any other questions that I can help you guys with today? If not, we can wrap it up and meet back tomorrow. Gosh, how long do we think we'll be out of school? Well, I think at least another week for sure. So your original spring break week, I think you'll be out. Beyond that, I just can't predict, and I don't want to say anything. Like, this is a pretty big situation here that I don't want to just pop off at. And in a week's time, with a little professional learning, for learning, if you can't do it equitably. So I think what I said earlier, but it's got to be done on a basis of teachers delivering instruction and holding students accountable for participating in instruction, at least in Wake County. And I think in time, perhaps they'll make that decision statewide. A lot of local districts, there's 115 school districts in North Carolina. They have a whole lot of inconsistencies right now in the way that they're proceeding in this time period. And I'm not sure that that can hold. I think that increasingly we're going to see pleas to the governor to help us start treating districts the same and testing. And we're used to the state telling us what to do when it comes to big things like calendar, testing, curriculum, staffing in North Carolina. So, alrighty, I think I'm going to wrap it up. Not seeing a whole lot of other questions. Tomorrow I might have a guest. Vicki Adamson, our county commissioner, has offered to come sit with me during our session, and that would be amazing to get kind of her frontline view of how we're approaching this crisis at the county level. But we'll just see. If she can't come tomorrow, she'll come. Caroline at home and one physical contact from the beginning. Yes. I do think we could have been more responsive, but the problem is we had a huge learning curve here. I mean, it's always better than I was expecting, to be honest, because we're used to creature comforts as a culture for us. So I'm excited about the guest, Smith. And yeah, it sounds like a lot of you are having trouble with your connections. I'm going to end the stream. You can watch this later if you want to, or I'll just see you tomorrow. Okay, 10:30 again. All right, bye guys.